Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And this is, of course, the Weekly Hero, the weekly show that we do around here, running down and talking about all the stuff in the world of comic book movies. Now, this, of course, is the second last Heroes, Weekly Heroes episode that we're going to be doing in the year of 2017. Now, next week on the Weekly Hero, we're going to be using that episode, and I'm going to be doing that episode from Canada, actually, but we're going to be using that episode to look forward to and talk about the comic book movies of 2018. So what I thought we would do today is take this opportunity to look back, talk about, and rank the comic book / superhero films of 2017. Now, I already know one question that's going to come in. Are we going to count the Batman Lego movie? And I am not counting the Batman Lego movie. I would put that in a different genre altogether. So just so you're aware, I'm not counting that. Now, you may count it in your list, and that's perfectly good. But for the purposes of today's discussion, we're not going to be referring to it, and it's not going to be part of any of the lists that we do. So, what we're going to do is, I'm going to take the first 10-15 minutes here, talk about the comic book movies of 2017, I'm going to rank them, and then after we do all of that, I'm going to go to your guys' questions. We're going to take your guys' questions live for those of you who are watching live. Two ways to get a live question on. Number one, of course, use the super chat. That gets your comment on the show, but then also I'm going to save a little bit of time to take some Twitter questions as well, so get ready to start firing in some tweets. Okay, so with all of that, 2017, I am ready to call probably overall my favorite year ever for comic book movies. And the main reason I'm willing to call it my favorite year for comic book movies is because there were 6 major comic book films that came out this year. Which, first of all, is amazing that we had 6 major comic book films come out this year. But I liked all of them. There's not one of them that I walked out of theater going, I didn't like that. And that by itself makes it an extraordinary year. Now, there were years that had better comic book films, but this overall, I don't have a comic book movie this year that I just flat out didn't like. Certainly there are films I like more than others, absolutely, as I'm sure is the case with you guys as well. But I absolutely loved this year for comic book films. They were all what I would consider positive, which is a great thing and a great place to be at. So, let's start talking about them. I have ranked these from number 6 to number 1, all right? So I'm going to go from the bottom and work our way up to the top. And we're going to start off with this. Let's look back at what I believe might even have been the first comic book movie to come out this year, or second. Anyway, it was Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I put that in my number 6 spot. I did enjoy this film. They went for more humor than they did with the first one. Now, the first one was already really fun, very entertaining, very funny. They decided to double down on the humor part of it. And for the most part, the humor part of it worked. It did, for the most part. However, it also had more misfires in their humor than Guardians of the Galaxy 1 did, or many others. Actually, there was a number of scenes that they went for big humor in it that didn't quite work for me. Overall, I enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I thought it was good. I also thought it was a step down from James Gunn's brilliant first Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn's first Guardians of the Galaxy is just stellar, just amazing. I still to this day, I can't even remember how many times I've watched that movie. I have basically lost count of how many times I have watched Guardians of the Galaxy, and I get a major kick out of it every single time. But, number 2, while good, did not live up to that high level. So for me, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 comes in the bottom of our list, but still positive, but it comes in at the bottom of our list at number 6. And I'm still looking forward to seeing what James Gunn does with number 3, because I still think this guy is a visionary, fun, imaginative director, and I'm very excited to see what he does with Guardians of the Galaxy 3. All right, let's move up the list now. And we come up to spot number 5. And spot number 5, I give to what was probably my most anticipated comic book movie of the year, and that is Justice League. Now, I know there's a bunch of you guys out there that didn't like Justice League, and that's all fair and good. I did. For me, it did some things better than, say, Batman vs. Superman did. Granted, it also did some things worse. On the worst part, to me, it's really highlighted by Batman. I thought the Batman character was a significant step down in Justice League from Batman vs. Superman. I loved the Batman character in Batman vs. Superman. You guys have heard me talk about this before. I think that Batman was the best incarnation of the on-screen Batman we've ever had. And I just adored it. This one, they kind of changed directions, and it felt like they changed philosophies with Batman in this one. Like in the first one, he was Batman, and Bruce Wayne was the fake facade. In this one, he's Bruce Wayne, and Batman is the fake facade. And I didn't like the way they reversed that, and there's a number of scenes that didn't quite work, but still, overall as a film, the action sequences, I think, were top-notch. I liked a lot of the chemistry between the characters, which is key. If this movie happens and you don't have this great chemistry between the characters, and if we don't like watching this team of superheroes on screen together, then the movie just fails before it even starts. But I felt that was actually one of the big strengths of Justice League, was the chemistry, the camaraderie between them and how it develops. I love the banter between them was really great. Some of the moments between Cyborg and Flash I thought were very fun and endearing at the same time. Flash as a character played by Ezra Miller was one of the big surprise standouts of the film to me. I thought Ray Fisher playing Cyborg was really positive. Number of really good things. Now, yes, we have what many Marvel and DC films suffer from, which is sometimes forgettable at best, terrible at worst villains. And Steppenwolf in this one, first of all, his CG was terrible. I thought there were some really cool things you could have done with him, but at the end of the day, much like many Marvel villains, he ended up being kind of forgettable. And that was unfortunate at the same time. So, yeah, Justice League, was it as good as I was hoping it would be? No, probably not. But did I enjoy myself? Well, enough to go back to the theater to watch it 6 times. I enjoyed it, so I had fun with it. And for me, it comes in just above Guardians of the Galaxy 2 in the number 5 spot. Okay, so my number 6 is Guardians of the Galaxy 2. My number 5 is Justice League. Let's move on to my number 4 film of the year. My number 4 comic book film of the year comes to us in the form of Wonder Woman. When Patty Jenkins signed on to direct this film, I think we all realized, at least those of us who know what Patty Jenkins is capable of, I think we all realized this could end up being something really special. And it did end up being something really special. The way she crafted the mythology of Themyscira, my favorite part of the movie, now you don't want to be able to say that my favorite part of the movie was the beginning, because that gives the implication that it just went downhill from there, and I don't mean to imply that at all. But my favorite part of the movie was the beginning, the whole way she set up Themyscira, and that culture and that way of life, and, you know, as Diana as a young girl, and then ultimately growing up a little bit. I just loved it, which was one of the reasons I got so excited watching Justice League when I realized they were going back to Themyscira, because that was my favorite part of Wonder Woman. You had Patty Jenkins basically take her time with the character. Now, granted, they botched, once again, like many Marvel films and many DC films do, they botched the villain. I thought their Ares villain was just a misstep. Just completely botched. But like I said, that happens in a lot of, and sometimes it happens in very good comic book movies. And that unfortunately was the case with Wonder Woman. But still, I love the fact that they isolated it in the World War time. That gave the filmmakers a lot of creative breathing room to not have to worry about how does this cross over with the DC cinematic universe. They didn't have to worry about that. I love the way they portrayed the era. I love Chris Pine in this thing. I thought Chris Pine was actually, performance-wise, he was the beating heart of the movie. I just thought what he did was fantastic. And I ended up enjoying Wonder Woman a lot more than I thought I would. Good enough for me to come in at the number 4 best comic book movie of the year. All right, let's move on to number 3. Again, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 at number 6. At number 5 is Justice League. At number 4 is Wonder Woman. At number 3 is the recent Thor Ragnarok. This movie... Look, I didn't know what to expect from it because I am a big, big fan. For those of you guys who watch me and have watched me for any period of time, you know that I am a big fan of Kenneth Branagh's first Thor movie. I think it's a horribly underrated comic book movie. I think besides Man of Steel, which I think is the most underrated comic book movie of all time, I think the next most underrated comic book movie is Thor, the original. I think what Kenneth Branagh did with those characters and that world was fantastic, which is why the original Thor is in my top 10 all-time favorite comic book films. Thor 2, while I don't think was horrible, even I, somebody who really loves that Thor world, I felt it was a big step down. And I watched it again the other day just because it was on TBS or something like that. They were airing it. And so I was watching. It's like, yeah, this really was a step down in quality from the first Thor. So with all that being said, I really wasn't quite sure what to make going into Thor 3. I was very excited that Taika Waititi was going to be directing it. I mean, that was fantastic news that he was going to be doing it. So wonderful. Taika Waititi is going to be doing it. I got to go and watch a little bit of a preview of it with Taika and got to see a bit of the Korg character. And there was promise, but I was still a little bit nervous because, again, Thor 2 for me took a step down. And with Taika Waititi coming in to bring a much heavier comedy element to it than the previous Thor films had, I just didn't know if that would work or if that would jive. And it did. It worked. I mean, every audience that I saw this movie with was just howling and having an amazingly good time watching this movie. Great fight between Thor and Hulk. I mean, just overall, they did just a really great job with this. I love the new characters. They like Korg and Meek. Oh, that's Meek. He's got swords for hands. He was great. See you later, new Doug. Yeah, Korg was one of the big standouts in this thing. Of course, then you got Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie, who was like one of the elements nearly stole the show. You've got Chris Hemsworth has really evolved with this character because this character, Thor, has evolved. He's changed from that first Thor. And there's even a scene in the movie where they kind of address that, where Thor is talking to Loki. He says, life is about change and evolving and changing. And it's kind of, to me, that was Taika Waititi's way and Marvel's way of looking at the camera and winking to the audience and saying, yeah, our character, this character Thor, he is changing and evolving and becoming something different than he was 5 years ago. And he is definitely a different type of character now than he was then. And I didn't know how I would handle that, but I enjoyed it greatly. It turned out being a fabulously entertaining film. So, Thor Ragnarok comes in at the number 3 spot. So, now we get into the top 2, and I think you guys know which order this is all going to end up being in, but still, just to recap, at number 6, we have Guardians of the Galaxy 2. At number 5, we have Justice League. At number 4, we have Wonder Woman. At number 3, we have Thor Ragnarok. And now we move into number 2, and you guys know what I'm going to say here. The number 2 best comic book film of the year to me was Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, I, like many people, was a little bit critical of the initial promotions we saw for Spider-Man Homecoming because to me it looked like Iron Man 4 with special guest star Spider-Man. That's what the marketing looked like. And you know what? In hindsight, I get what they were going for. This was the third incarnation of Spider-Man, the second reboot in just a handful of years. We've got this brand new kid playing Spider-Man. You want to anchor the audience by putting in a more familiar face to the MCU fandom, so you bring in Tony Stark. And when you watch the movie, you realize not only was that a great marketing decision, but narrative-wise, it completely fits. Spider-Man needed that mentor figure. Someone who, number one, gave him the suit, and that's probably the thing I dislike most about the movie was the suit, but we'll get to that in a second. But number 2, be there to put him in his place and to remind him he is new in this world and he's got a lot to learn. And at the end of the day, the addition of Tony Stark actually ended up being a really good thing, whereas I thought it might be something that detracted. And thankfully, Tony wasn't in the movie nearly as much as the trailer suggested and made me fear he would be. Because it looked to me like it was going to be the Spider-Man and Iron Man show, and it wasn't. It was definitely a Spider-Man movie with Tony Stark popping in there here and there. And Jon Favreau was fantastic in it. I loved him playing Hap, so that was really good at the same time. Again, my biggest problem with this movie, oh, and of course, Michael Keaton as Vulture was fantastic. And one of the shining spots, whereas Marvel quite often has, really underuses their villains, like the Grandmaster in Thor, while Jeff Goldblum was very funny in some scenes, as the overall film villain, meh. Yeah, that happens to Marvel a lot. Michael Keaton stands out. Michael Keaton gets moved out of that basement territory and into that category when you can start having discussions with, like, Loki, for instance. Still, Loki's the better villain, but I thought Michael Keaton's Vulture popped up there. Now, the thing that I did not like was that, this is the first Spider-Man movie, and you're already putting him into an Iron Man Jr. armor. Now, I get it. Please don't send me any more tweets about, John, but in the comics, Spider-Man at one point puts on a Tony Stark. Yeah. I know. But we spent 70 years of Spider-Man without an Iron Man costume. And I would have liked to have seen just Spider-Man being Spider-Man. Without the gadgets and without, basically an Iron Man Jr. suit. I just wanted to see him being Spider-Man. He's special enough. Maybe in the 4th or 5th film that he's in, give him the Iron Spider outfit, sure. But anyway, it wasn't a big detractor for me. But for me, that's one of the things that I kind of wish otherwise. But still, other than that, Tom Holland is a fabulous new Spider-Man. And now what is going to be a long line of really good actors playing Spider-Man. So as we had Tobey playing him, which was great. I thought Andrew Garfield was a great Spider-Man, and that worked really well for me. And of course, now we've got Tom Holland, who was wonderful. Just wonderful in the role. So I enjoyed this movie thoroughly, very entertained by it. Spider-Man Homecoming is my number 2 best comic book movie of the year. So, I mean, you guys already know what the number 1 is, but still, let's recap. Again, number 6, we have Guardians of the Galaxy 2, that is. We have Justice League at number 5. At number 4, we have Wonder Woman. At number 3, we have Thor Ragnarok. At number 2, we have Spider-Man Homecoming. And that leaves us, of course, which was easily, by far and away. Now, you have Guardians of the Galaxy 2 here. Then you have Justice League, Wonder Woman, Thor Ragnarok, Spider-Man Homecoming. Okay, so there's that. And then up here, you have Logan. Logan is, to me, without question and without debate, is by far and away the superior comic book movie of the year. In a year filled with really good comic book movies, Logan, to me, stands out as the clear winner, as the best comic book movie there. Not only that, but as of right now, the last film I need to see to complete out my list, I'm going to go see the new Steven Spielberg movie, The Post, tonight. So, but in a world and in a year filled with good comic book movies, Logan is not only the best comic book movie of the year, to me it's still my favorite movie of the year overall, let alone comic book movie. What Daphne Keane brought to this, from supporting characters, Daphne Keane and Patrick Stewart were insanely good in their roles. One of the best young actor roles, I'll still call her Daphne Keane a child in this. One of the best child performances we've seen in years was Daphne Keane as X-23, which is great. Hugh Jackman gives the best performance he's ever given as Logan. Patrick Stewart, I contend, gives the best performance of his career, X-Men universe or not. I think what Patrick Stewart did in this movie, with an aging and weakened Professor Charles Xavier, the most powerful mind on the planet, which is essentially a weapon of mass destruction, I just thought was insanely good. Out of all the Academy Awards that I would hope Logan will get nominated for, the one I'm absolutely so firmly for is that Patrick Stewart gets nominated for Best Supporting Actor for this role. It is just by far and away my favorite comic book movie of the year. Some incredible supporting performances. Hugh Jackman does it again. The story and the narrative is wonderful. That gritty Western genre feel of the film really played it out. It's tragic and sad and heartwarming and hopeful all at the same time. Seeing Wolverine at his most feral that we've ever seen him on the big screen. To me, it was just the comic book movie of the year, in a year filled with what I consider to be good comic book movies. Now, I know not everybody will agree with me. I'm sure there's a number of you who maybe don't think some of these comic book movies were good, and that's fine. Maybe some of you thought there was another comic book movie that was better than Logan. I have a hard time wrapping my head around that, but I respect your opinion, so maybe that's the case as well. So here's what I'm going to do, guys. It's time for me to go over now. We're going to take live questions and comments from you guys, talk a little bit more about comic book movies and things like that. You got some comments on my list or some comments you want to make about the comic book movies of 2017? Maybe you got a question. Maybe you got something you want to talk about going into 2018. Whatever you want to do is completely up to you. Once again, start firing them in. Either use the super chat to fire in or use Twitter. Here's how you get message to me on Twitter. Simply tweet to me at John Campea. Just jump on Twitter and tweet to me at John Campea, and I'll start collecting those tweets here in just a minute. Now, before we get to those, let me do my little shameless plug that I generally do about my channel, about the only thing that keeps my channel up and running, and that is my Patreon supporters. Guys, do me a favor. If you watch my videos and you enjoy watching my videos, spend any time every month watching my videos, do me a favor and just take a minute and go over to www.patreon.com/John Campea. There you get all the information about what does it mean to be a Patreon supporter, how does being a Patreon supporter make these shows actually happen, what are the benefits of being a Patreon supporter, and all that kind of stuff. And after reading all that stuff, maybe you'll decide to be a Patreon supporter too, and if you do, that's awesome. And if you don't, that's totally fine too. I'm just glad that you guys are here being a film fan and a fan of comic book movies along with me. All right, with all that out of the way now, let's go over to the live stuff that you guys are sending in. And we start this off with Shivam Dixit, who writes, how many Infinity Stones do you think Thanos will have collected by the end of Infinity War? My guess is 4, Power, Space, Time, and one other, or do you think all? Well, here's what I think about that. And this is, I've got fans online who have been convincing me more and more of this, because I wasn't thinking this way necessarily a few months ago, but fans have been making some arguments to me that has slowly been starting to influence me. So this is where I'm at right now, and I've got nothing to back this up with. How many Infinity Stones do I think Thanos will have by the end of Infinity War? I'm thinking all of them. Not only that, I think he's got the completed Infinity Gauntlet and everything by the end. And I'm starting to think that maybe he gets defeated at the end of Infinity War. Now, we've all been assuming, myself included, that Infinity War is going to kind of then be like a two-parter. But there's a couple of movies that happen in between Avengers 3 and Avengers 4. There are a few other films in between. So you can't just have a cliffhanger of an ending at the end of Infinity War, right? Infinity War has to have an end so that these other Marvel Cinematic Universe movies can then happen. And then we come back to Avengers 4. And I always just thought that, Thanos would be the guy in Avengers 3 and Thanos would be the guy in Avengers 4. I'm starting to think, and I'm basing this on nothing, okay? This is not based on anything. But I'm starting to suspect that maybe, just maybe, Thanos is actually just defeated in 3, and then something else becomes a problem that leads into 4 that still has something to do with the Infinity Stones. Again, I got nothing to base that on, but I've just been reading more and more theories from people and fans online, making some really good insights and arguments to me that made me go, well, maybe you're right. Maybe that's the way they're going. Let me know what you guys think about that. What do you think the chances are of Thanos actually completing the getting the whole Infinity Gauntlet thing put together and actually then being defeated by the end of Avengers 3 Infinity War? I'm going to set an over-under at 27%. Would you take over 27% chance that Thanos gets defeated by the end of Infinity War, or will you take the under 27% chance that he gets defeated? Leave me your thoughts in the comments section below. All right, let's move on to the next one. This next one, also from Siobhan, who writes, that moment when you realize Marvel would have trouble fitting the names of the cast in the Infinity War poster, as it would literally take up 60% of the space. You're right. I mean, this is a huge cast, awful lot of people in it. It's going to be interesting to see the poster design. I'm thinking they don't put any names on the poster design. I think they're just going to have that little bottom of the poster that you always have where it's just tiny, tiny lettering, and they'll just put all the names in there because there's just too many names to populate. So you're right. I don't think we're going to see all that. Reggie Phoenix writes, over under 65% that we see Cap or Bucky in Black Panther. I'm going to take the under, only because you set the number so high. Like, I think it's a little over half. So if you set the number at 50%, I might have taken the over. So I do think he will. I think we're going to see Captain America or Bucky, even just momentarily, in Black Panther. However, I think 65 is too high. So while I do think we'll see them, I'll take the under. If you're going to set the line at 65, I'll take the under, because I would say it's probably around 55%, so I will take the under on it. Jacob, where'd I go? Jacob Bergman writes, nothing, just Jacob Bergman just sends in a super chat. Thank you so much, Jacob. Next one comes to us from Jay Vardy, who writes, I have seen all generations of Spider-Man in theaters. Andrew Garfield, to me, is the best to embody Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And you know what? I agree. You're talking about 3 different things. Who is the best Spider-Man? Who's the best Peter Parker? Who's the best balance of Spider-Man and Peter Parker? I agree with you. Andrew Garfield is my guy who is the best balance of Spider-Man and Peter Parker. Tom Holland to me is the best Peter we've ever had. And Tobey Maguire to me is straight up the best Spider-Man we've had. But that's just how I look at it. But I'm in agreement with you, Jay Vardy, that I think Andrew Garfield still is kind of the best mix of the two. Not that his movie is better than the other movies. Just when you're talking Betrayal Ride, I think he did a really nice job balancing who Peter and Spider-Man are and making that one character. I just think he did a really good job with that. All right. Ian Nguyen-Du writes, Logan is the Last of Us in movie form. Well, you're not the only one to mention that before, Ian, but I mean, I don't agree with that. I think there are similarities. There's some very surface level similarities, but also massive, massive differences. Like, hey, it's an old gruff man with a little girl. That's The Last of Us. Well, in a very thin surface way, yes, and there are a couple of thematic similarities. Absolutely there are. I'm a big fan of Last of Us and of Logan, obviously. But once you get past those thin surface similarities, really more things are just cosmetic, you realize they are two completely different movies. They're completely different stories in most ways. But yes, on its surface, they bear some resemblances, but it's really just a thin one, and it's really just cosmetic. At least that's how I look at it. Thanks a lot for the comment. All right. Next one comes to us from Asmer Junkie, who writes, name is pronounced ASMR. Asmer. Okay, there you go. John, do you think Disney won't have to change Deadpool due to the nature of his character? Well, look, that's been the big question I've had and big concern I've had about Disney taking over the X-Men universe, including Deadpool, is they're going to neuter Deadpool. Now, again, we've talked about this on the John Campea show lately. Bob Iger came out, made a statement, I think that was supposed to put everybody's minds at ease, at least that's what he was supposed to do, and basically said, look, I think there is room for R-rated material in our films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as long as we let the audience know what they're in for. Now, how R? Does that mean, you, like Bob, you'd be letting them drop the F-bomb 5 or 6 times? Or do you mean you would have actually let them do the International Women's Day joke that they did in Deadpool? Because I don't know that Disney would have let them do that, but it's really hard to say. We're just going to have to wait and see how they decide to really do all this. I do think we're going to see a minor change. I think you're going to see them tone down Deadpool a little. And if it's just a little, then I'm okay with it. If it's just a little, that's fine. I can live with it. I don't think I see them just letting Ryan Reynolds run wild and be as vulgar as he wants to be. But I think it'll definitely be edgier and further than any other Marvel film. And if they just tone him down a little, but as long as they restrain themselves and don't, go nuts in cutting down how much Deadpool can do, I think it'll be okay. We're going to have to wait and see how much Bob Iger really means when he says we're going to let it be rated R. Let's see what he means. All right. The next one comes to us from Jacob Bergman, who writes, could Valiant Comics partnered with Sony compete with Marvel and DC? No. I mean, it's possible. It's possible. But, I mean, if you had to put money on it, no. You're just talking about comics with Marvel and DC that are, with comic titles that are household names, that even if nobody's read a single comic book in their life and nobody's ever watched a single comic book movie, these are properties that are littered with names that are household names, even amongst people who's never read them. Everybody knows what Aquaman is. Everybody knows who Superman is. Everybody knows who Spider-Man is. I mean, these are household things. You're talking about now trying to create something that doesn't have that big advantage. So no, I don't see them actually being competition, but they don't need to be competition. They just need to put out their own movies and be successful. That's all they got to do. They don't need to make as much money as a Marvel film or as much money as a DC film to be successful. You make these movies for $80 million, $100 million, and you make $400 million at the box office. Does that compete with Justice League? No, but you're making money, and that's the goal of making movies. So I think they can be fine, and I think they could be successful. I don't think we should give them a standard of success by saying you got to compete with Justice League and you got to compete with Avengers, because that's unrealistic. They're not going to compete on that level, but they don't need to in order to succeed. All right, let's move on here. Jose M. writes, did you want to see Darkseid at the end of Justice League? I would have been fine if they did. I'm totally fine that they didn't. Either way, really, it wouldn't have added anything to the movie to have a quick scene of Darkseid going, "Hey, I'm Darkseid, everybody. Hi, I'm here," and the end credits. What does that add to the movie? Really? I mean, at the bottom line, if you really look at it, how, from a narrative point of view, how does that make the movie any better than it was? So, while, hey, if they did, fine, great, that's cool. Look at that. It's Darkseid, awesome. But they didn't, and I'm totally fine with it because he wasn't an integral part to the story. So ultimately, we're talking about, so it wouldn't have changed the movie in any way, shape, or form. All we're talking about is popping up at the end and going, "Hi, everybody, I'm Darkseid, and I'm here, and I look forward to interacting with you all more in Justice League 2." It, it wouldn't have, it would not have fundamentally changed anything. So if they did, totally would have been fine with it. Sure, probably would have been cool. But they didn't, and I think it's perfectly fine that they didn't, because structurally it wouldn't have changed anything about the movie anyway. So I'm totally fine that they didn't. Let's see. Ben Rayner writes, what's your favorite scene in Logan? Oh, gosh. My favorite scene is the farm scene. What about yours? Oh, my goodness. Where they're talking about the scene in the casino hotel room where Patrick Swayze's watching the Western with Daphne Keane and explaining the significance of the movie and what's happening. That to me was gorgeous and beautiful. The whole scene with Professor Xavier dying is just unbelievably good. The whole thing about near the end of the film with Wolverine taking the serum and going total berserker, which was great. The scene at the dinner table with Logan and his daughter, clone daughter, Patrick Stewart, and the farm family was just it felt so warm and real. The movie's just filled with so many moments. I would have to think about what my actual favorite is. There's just too many to count. All right, Dirk Walker writes, I think it would be cool if Thanos wins in Infinity War and Ant-Man and the Wasp take place during his reign of terror. I mean, they could. They absolutely could do that. I don't think it's what they're going to do, but I'm not going to fall out of my chair in shock if that's the way they end up managing it and that's the way they end up handling it. All right, next one. Ben Rayner writes, who's your favorite villain from this year? Mine is X-24. It was Old Man Logan versus the worst parts of Wolverine. Excellent, or epic. In the comic book movies, who is my favorite villain? Gosh, this was not a strong year for villains, so I will go Vulture. Michael Keaton's Vulture is my favorite villain because he embodies to me one of the things that I find the most terrifying about villains. Villains who think they're the good guys. Villains who think they're doing the right thing. Villains who feel like they're being wronged. Those to me are the most terrifying of villains. Like Darth Vader aside, those to me are the most terrifying villains. And we have that because that scene, it might be one of my favorite scenes in all of comic book movies this year, is that scene when Peter shows up at the house to pick up his date for prom and Michael Keaton answers the door like, oh shit, he's her dad. And that whole scene, that awkward interaction with them in the kitchen, it was so brilliantly directed, so wonderfully acted. I love it. So I'm going to go Falcon as my favorite villain of the year. Thanks a lot. All right, let's go. The Batflick writes in, with Gal Gadot having success as Wonder Woman under Patty Jenkins, but not doing so great anywhere else, would you say that Gal is a system actress similar to a system QB in football? Well, a lot of people aren't going to know what you mean by that, but I think that's a fantastic analogy. It really is. Because what he means by that is there are some quarterbacks in football. I know some of you aren't football fans, but follow me here, okay? There are some quarterbacks in football that are not necessarily the most talented quarterbacks, but maybe they can do one or two things well. And what they do is if they've got a really good head coach, the head coach will structure the offense in such a way that does not expose the weaknesses of that quarterback, but rather relies more on the quarterback's gifts and talents. So let's say that, you've got a quarterback who, he doesn't have great arm strength, he doesn't have great mobility, but one of the things he does, he never turns the ball over. Okay, well then, let's structure our offense around short, quick outlet passes. We know he'll put the ball in their hands. We know he won't turn the ball over. So let's go pass heavy, short, quick release plays, and maybe even some quarterback option plays because he knows how to protect the football. We can let him run a couple of times and not worry that he's going to fumble when he does it. So you're not going to get the big explosive plays. You're not going to get the deep long bombs. You're not going to get a lot of big touchdown to interception turnover. You have a coach that hides the quarterback's weaknesses while trying to play to what strengths they have. They're not a great quarterback, but under the right coach, there can be some success. I think that's exactly what you're looking at with Gal Gadot in Wonder Woman under a great director like Patty Jenkins. Because you look, Gal Gadot looks better in Wonder Woman than any of the other movies she's been in. And I think the big difference is she's in the hands of a really gifted actor's director in Patty Jenkins, who understood, okay, because remember, Patty Jenkins inherited Gal Gadot. She didn't cast her. She inherited her. So what Patty Jenkins did, I think, said, okay, here's what my actress is weak in. This is what my quarterback isn't good at. Here's some things she can do. So I'm going to make sure that all of her scenes, we're not going to expose her weaknesses. We're going to limit her scenes to the things she can do well and make come across really good. And in doing that, Gal Gadot came across, like, remember, I thought she would ruin the movie. I thought Gal Gadot would just ruin Wonder Woman. But she didn't at all. Put in the hands of a great director like Patty Jenkins, who was able to camouflage and hide her weaknesses as an actress and just play her strengths off. You got what you were saying, like a serviceable quarterback. I think we got a serviceable performance out of Gal Gadot in the role. And that is way better than I thought we were going to get. Now, there's a lot of you out there who think she did a great job in that movie. That's fine if that's your opinion. I still watch the acting in it and think, okay, she didn't distract me. She didn't take me out of the film. She played her role. She did what the director needed her to do, and it worked. And really, for somebody coming from my point of view, there's nothing more I can ask. That's as much as I can ask for, and they delivered. So anyway, that's just kind of how I look at it. You may look at it different. That's totally cool. Let's see. Thanks a lot for the really good analogy, Batflick. Reggie Phoenix writes, thoughts on DC's streaming service and Titans? Well, they're doing a streaming service. They're doing Titans. We haven't really seen anything or have any kind of sample size to have a real coherent thought. I'm interested in what they're doing. I'm curious to see how it turns out. I mean, we got the one still shot of Robin, which I think the costume design is fantastic. I mean, I talked about that on the John Campea show a few weeks ago. I thought the costume design looked fantastic, but this could be a big steaming pile of garbage, and the streaming service could be an unmitigated disaster. Or it could be the next big hit. But until we see something, it's tough for me to have a real opinion about that. But let's keep our eyes open on that, Reggie. Okay, just a couple more, then I'll go over to Twitter. JackJack121 writes, missed a few videos due to my busy schedule, but keep up the fantastic work, John. Glad to hear about Logan also. Thank you so much, JackJack. I appreciate the support. Let's see. Siobhan Dixon, right? Can I borrow your Jor-El statue? Yeah, actually, I don't have a ton of stuff, but let me bring this over. I've brought Jor-El in a couple of times here. This is, I want to be very careful because the base is heavy. This is my favorite collectible that I have. And I got a bunch that I don't have on the shelf here. I've got them packed away. But this, I don't know if you guys can get a really good look. Actually, let me switch over to this camera just for a second so you guys can get a better look at my man here. Oh, I don't have the camera set up. Sorry about that. So anyway, this is Jor-El. I don't know if you can tell how perfect that face looks. And it's got this great base with the House of El emblem on it, and he's holding the codex in his hand. This thing is just nutty good. This is my favorite piece that I have. And I don't have a whole ton, but Jor-El is definitely my favorite. I'll just put this down over here for now. Because I love Man of Steel, and Russell Crowe is one of my favorite actors in the world. So having Russell Crowe play, not Jor-El, but play his father, is just, or playing Jor-El, who is his father, is just magic to me. And that is a Sideshow collectible piece. The detail in the face is staggering. Just staggering. I love that piece. It is my favorite piece that I have in my collection. So thank you so much for asking about that. Mr. Hobbitino, who writes, Wanda, while holding the Reality Stone and missing her brother, causes the universe to merge. Now, Evan Peters' version of Quicksilver is her brother. I don't think so. I don't think they'll go too wacky like that. I don't think they're going to bring him back. If they do, they've got an interesting problem because now you've got another universe with a very successful Quicksilver. As a matter of fact, the Quicksilver in the X-Men universe ended up being better than the Quicksilver in the MCU. But now you're going to have two Quicksilvers. What do you do about that? Which they're going to kind of theoretically face that problem, but I don't think they're going to bring him back. But it is possible. It's not completely outside the realm of possibility that they would do something like that. Okay, let's now jump over to Twitter and see what some people are saying on Twitter. Let's see. Going to start off with this one, and this one comes to us from Blind Old Goth, who writes, John, Marvel could return the R-rated Max branding to separate their adult movies. I don't think that's what... I mean, look, is that an option that's open to them? Yes. But if you listen to everything that Bob Iger and Alan Horn have been saying, it doesn't sound like that's the direction they're going at all. It sounds like they're going to integrate R-rated stuff into the MCU. And according to Bob Iger's comment, and this is what he said, I think we can do that. I think there's a place for it if we make sure that we let the audience know what they're in for. And so that kind of sounds like what their plan is. Again, what you're saying works. You can do it. It's an option available to them. According to everything they've said so far, it just doesn't sound like that's what they're going to do at any rate. So, we'll see about that. All right, let's move on to the next tweet. This one comes to us from Mitch Brett, who writes, Hi, John, huge fan of the show. Thank you so much. Quick question. Do you think Marvel will release Iron Man 4? Yeah, I think they're going to do an Iron Man 4. I mean, if I had to set an over-under for Iron Man 4 ever happening, I'll put the over-under at 60%, which means I'm not going to put $100 on it, no, but I do think, if I had to lean one way or the other, will they do an Iron Man 4, will they not? I'm going to lean towards yes. I think they know it's too big of a potential cash cow. There's too much potential there, too much money they can completely make. So yeah, I do think they'll probably do an Iron Man 4. All right, let's just take a couple more here. This one comes to us from Mr. Nathan Mister, who writes, would you like to see more international adaptations of Marvel/DC, example, comics in the future? If you mean international adaptations, like things like Alpha Flight, if that's what you mean, if that's the case, well, I would love to see Alpha Flight. Alpha Flight, because they're a Canadian superhero team, where Wolverine is originated from. I think that would be fantastic. Like seeing Vindicator and Puck and Sasquatch and North Star and all them doing their thing. That would be magnificent. Other versions of that from different countries? Sure. Look, you still got to mix in what's a good business decision with all of that. Like what's a good business decision, what will work, as well as what would be fun and great for the audience. So you got to draw that line somewhere. If they'll do it, I don't know. But I would be interested in it for sure. All right, let's take one more. And this one comes to us from MoteAsQ316, who writes, who is your favorite villain of all time in superhero movies? Magneto. Magneto is my favorite villain of all time. And that stems from the place that Magneto is actually my favorite Marvel character of all time, in comic books or otherwise. Magneto is a beautiful, complex, complicated individual. Eric Lesnar is like, there's so many layers to him that's both tragic, heroic, monstrous and evil, good at his core, but it's just so, there's so much to him. On top of that, one of the most powerful beings to exist in the world. Somebody, if he wanted to, could just rip the earth in half. I mean, there's something about a character like that is so compelling and so great. And then how they utilized him in my all-time favorite comic book storyline, which was Age of Apocalypse, and his role in that, was fantastic. I love that it came down to Magneto versus Apocalypse in the final big fight of that entire series, which was magic and wonderful. But yeah, I'm going to say if you're going to qualify him as a villain, and most of the time he is a villain, compared to when he's a hero, we'll say that. You know what? I'm going to take I got a couple of minutes left here, so I'll just take two more here. This one I'll take from the Baby Gooner, who writes, John, Feige said that the first 5 minutes of Infinity War will show how big and bad of a villain Thanos is. Thoughts? He's going to beat the crap out of somebody. Maybe it's Thor. You know, there is a theory out there that the ship that shows up off the starboard bow of Thor's ship is Thanos' ship. And, you know, we know from that D23 teaser that Thor ends up just floating in space. Maybe Infinity War starts with Thanos boarding Thor's ship, kicking the hell out of everybody on that ship, which would include Valkyrie, which would include Heimdall, which would include Korg, which would include Hulk, which would include Thor. So imagine your opening sequence of this movie is Thanos boarding Thor's ship, ripping through all of them, and then destroying their ship and taking the Infinity Stone that Loki has on the ship. Because remember in the trailer we see Loki bringing up the Infinity Stone. That might happen in the first few minutes of the movie. So if that's the case, what a way to start the film. And establishing your villain right off the bat as the biggest threat the Avengers or Earth have ever faced. That would be a great way to do it. All right. Let's see. Final question I will take today, and then we'll wrap this thing up. And this one comes to us from aking84, who writes, I've heard that some people want a Spider-Man Deadpool movie. In the comics, Deadpool is obsessed with Spider-Man. I've gotten a few emails from people saying, what do you think the chances are of this? What do you think the chances are of that? It's tricky. It's tricky. Because Deadpool fans want Deadpool rated R. And they are not going to put Spider-Man in an R-rated movie. So what do? Well, then there's the option that you bring Deadpool in and you beep out everything he says. Okay, you could do that. But the R-rated nature of Deadpool isn't just foul language that comes out of his mouth. He does incredibly graphically violent things and puts himself into and says incredibly mature humor, whether he uses F-bombs or not, and also puts himself in incredibly mature situations. It's not just him dropping F-bombs that makes him rated R. It's a whole lot of stuff. So, you know they're not going to put Spider-Man because they're going to protect that character. Are they going to put Spider-Man in an R-rated film? You know they're never going to do that. Would they run the risk of alienating and upsetting Deadpool fans if they water down Deadpool just to put him in a movie with Spider-Man? I don't know about that. It's a tricky situation. If I'm Kevin Feige, I'm not sure how I would handle it. I'm sure Feige and Bob Iger and Alan Horn have talked about it, and maybe they've got a strategy, but I doubt you're going to see a Spider-Man Deadpool movie. I highly doubt it. Then again, I highly doubted that Marvel would let Deadpool be rated R if he ever came over to Marvel, and according to Bob Iger, they're going to let him do it. So who knows? I just have a hard time imagining them actually letting this happen, but we'll have to wait and see. All right, guys, that will do it for me for this installment of The Weekly Hero. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Listen, don't forget, guys, if you're not a subscriber already, click the subscribe button, become a subscriber to my YouTube channel. Also, make sure you click the thumbs up button. Leave your thought and comment in the comments section below. Make sure you're following me on social media, simply at John Campea. The Weekly Hero will be back again next week. It'll be the final one of the year. We're going to sit around and talk about and speculate the upcoming movies in 2018. I know that's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you guys join me for that. All right, guys, that will do it for me. My name is John Campea. Thanks for joining me, and until my next video, bye-bye.